There are multiple ghost appearances and oddities throughout the Pokemon series, and it's known that ghost-type Pokemon have been around since the very first installment of the Pokemon series of Red and Blue. While the existence of ghost Pokemon is an accepted part of the Pokemon universe, they are not the only ghosts present in Pokemon games. Developer Game Freak has also been putting human ghosts into the games for as long as the series has existed. While the appearance of these ghosts are rarely explained, they add a spooky side to an otherwise kid-friendly game series. Here are some of the creepiest ones throughout the Pokemon generations. Number 1. The Town of Supernatural Events. This is mainly in Generation 1 and 2, Lavender Town, a small town located in northeast Kanto, just south of the Rock Tunnel. In Pokemon Red, Green, Blue, Yellow, Fire Red, and Leaf Green, Lavender Town is infamous for being a ghost town. In that town, the Pokemon that die are buried in the Pokemon Tower, and their spirits roam around there as well. But in Pokemon Gold, Silver, HeartGold, and SoulSilver, a reception tower was built there in replace of the old tower, and the atmosphere of modernization was strong. According to the residents of Lavender Town, the Pokemon Tower is a famous Pokemon cemetery. All funerals and mourning activities are carried out in the tower. The ghosts of the Pokemon Tower are said to be dead or killed Pokemon souls. Lavender Town should be regarded as one of the most famous towns in the Pokemon series. In fact, because of the expressiveness of Game Boy consoles, Lavender Town wasn't much different from the other towns in Pokemon. The key was its background music being very strange. The most famous urban legend of Pokemon is the so-called Lavender Town event, where the main content of the urban legend simply states that the background music of Lavender Town was depressing and seriously critical. That was because the children's ears were not yet mature, and they could hear many sounds in the game that some adults couldn't. These sounds caused many children to collapse, and eventually some were forced to commit suicide. In fact, this is just an urban legend. The early BGM of Lavender Town used 2 channels to play different tones respectively. At the time, the frequency was also different, so some children may not have adapted to it when playing the game. But it is still far from the level of suicide. Afterwards, the background music became very warm through tone changes, and the background music still remains to be the one we so dearly remember. Moving along to Generation 4, and we have the Old Chateau. Like I mentioned before, the Pokemon Tower has, in various areas, general locations of cemeteries where Pokemon are buried. In the Sinnoh region, there is a similar tower called the Lost Tower. But when it comes to supernatural events, you can't forget to mention the Old Chateau. Sometimes you can see the ghost of a little girl and a housekeeper appearing in the 2nd floor bedroom and the 1st floor dining room respectively. When the protagonist enters a bedroom, a little ghost girl sometimes appears in the next room over. She then just walks out of the door and disappears. The butler appears on the other side of the dining table and is sitting in the dining room. When the protagonist walks forward, the butler begins walking towards the room on the left. Like the little girl, the housekeeper doesn't leave on foot. Instead, he seems to be floating off the ground. These 2 people will not meet, and the description of the haunted foreign house attached to the Old Chateau mentions that they're all ghosts. There is a missing statue in the corridor, a yokan in a room, a portrait of a staring man, and the ghost of a little girl and her housekeeper. Everything here gives the context of what has happened here before. In addition, in Pokemon Platinum, if you go to the library, there are old and broken notes that give the text of, "This is an old book. There are some scribbles on it. This is unknown, actually holding, the rest is blank." This old and weird book made some people shudder. Someone has even once studied the voice of the ghost Pokemon Rotom. The results turn out to be the words "tasukete," in Japanese meaning "save me." Later, when he listened again, he found out that Rotom had 4 different types of scales. Well, it doesn't matter what they actually are, because the Old Chateau reflects a real murder that happened in Japan. It goes somewhere along the lines of the murder of the Setagaya family, a bizarre murder that investigators still haven't figured out to this day. In the same region of Sinnoh, there is the mysterious Harbor Inn located on the northeastern side of Canalave City, and was once a thriving inn until it mysteriously closed down for many years. Now the doors remain locked and no one can seem to open them. Before obtaining the member card, trying to enter the Harbor Inn only yields to the phrase, "The door is tightly shut. It appears impossible to open." The only way to unlock the inn is by obtaining a member card via a Nintendo event or cheating. When inside, there is a man who puts people into a deep sleep. Once they awake, they will appear at New Moon Island where Darkrai can be battled. After the event, the door to the Harbor Inn locks again, never to be opened again. Generation 5's Pokemon Black and White have their fair share of ghosts as well. Following your victory over the Elite Four, as you cross the bridge, you will encounter a ghostly little girl standing on the bridge who will disappear when you approach her. Heading east of the bridge to the gate, you encounter an old woman who tells you that the ghostly girl used to play there with her Abra. before the bridge was built. In the continuing series of Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, the same ghostly little girl appears in the strange house that you encounter on your journey. When you encounter her on the upper floor, she actually talks to you, first looking for her family, and then for her Abra. She then talks about the Lunar Wing, which is what you came to the strange house for. In the next generation of Gen 6, Pokemon X and Y, a different ghost girl is found in a dojo in Lumio City, specifically as you're coming off of the lift on the upper floor. Unlike the girl in the Black and White games, she doesn't tell you anything other than a cryptic pronouncement, "No, you're not the one." In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, during the player's battle with Elite Four member Phoebe, a little girl appears twice, once on the chair and once near the player's backpack. The same girl appears in Mount Pyre, and she also says, "No, you're not the one." Keeping up the creepy shenanigans, there is a creepy hotel room with no person in it, but booked by someone at a very high price. In the hotel, you can hear the sounds of all the other residents through the speakers, but in this room, the only thing you can hear is silence. It should be obvious that this is not the first time that Nintendo has implemented the ghost factor into their games. It's just like their daily routine. In every Pokemon game, you can see some type of creepy or odd thing lurking around. It's as common as the trainers who want to beat the gym leaders and challenge the Elite Four and get the title champion. We see this ghost factor in Generation 8's Pokemon Sword and Shield. This time, the ghost story involves a young girl, but it doesn't leave as much of an impression as the ones in previous games, as it resolves all of its own mysteries within a short space of time. The ghost can be encountered in the city of Hammerlock. If you walk towards the right and climb some steps, you can encounter a girl in a dress. This young girl, Paula, asks the player to deliver a love letter to a boy named Frank, who lives in Bologna. It's obvious that things aren't what they seem from the start, as the letter is described as looking very old. Once the player reaches Bologna, they find a person named Frank, but he is an old man with grandchildren. Frank remembers a sickly girl from his childhood named Paula, but they had a fight and he moved away before they made up. The earlier Pokemon games likely would have left the story there, with the implication that Paula had died and given the player a message to pass on from beyond the grave. However, the story doesn't end there, as Paula won't be in her previous location in Hammerlock, but there will be a Reaper cloth on the ground. If the player picks up the Reaper cloth, they will then hear a ghostly voice, thanking them for delivering the letter. There's no telling if Game Freak or Nintendo will ever make an effort to explain the existence of human ghosts in Pokemon, or whether the recurring ghost characters will continue to appear in further installments. In the meantime, they add a spooky and mysterious layer to a game that's considered appropriate for all ages.